But yeah, as part of the show, we'd like to go ahead and talk about what we've been playing this week. So, Ian, I want to kick it off with you. Can you tell us about a game that you have been playing this week that you've enjoyed?
A game that I have enjoyed a lot, that we've been playing a lot because we were lucky enough to be able to get a couple of decks before the release of the game, is Keyforge, Call of the Archons.
Nice.
So yeah, so I've been seeing the game a lot. I've been hearing a bunch of people talk about it ever since Gen Con when they had like that preview event and everyone had decks. We were just like, man, I really need to get my hands on this.
All right.
And we found a couple people who had decks. So the John Gilmore and I, we share an office. We do game design stuff together a lot, and he's my Keyforge friend. Basically, we were on this mission together to go and hunt and find Keyforge decks.
Mm-hmm.
We were able to play the game with people who had decks. So we were using their decks that they had gotten from the Gen Con events and give it a try. And we loved it. We were immediately big fans of it. And then
Mm-hmm.
at another event, they were giving them away. And so we actually end up getting copies of, I think we have 3 decks total. I think maybe 4
Sure.
between the few of our friends and I.
Sure.
Uh, so yeah, so we've actually got copies of decks that we've been playing, and we're just showing it off to whoever, of course, sort of paying it forward to anyone, since people
Mm-hmm.
were uh, happy to let us play their copies. We're having other people play our decks that we got, teaching people along the way. But yeah, and it's
Nice.
it's a lot of fun. Like it is. I really like that I don't have to deck build. I think that's one of my favorite aspects of it.
Yeah.
So how much do you know about Keyforge? How much?
Yeah, so Keyforge again was announced at Gen Con 2018 this year during the in-flight report, which is kind of like the biggest keynote. Like video games have like these huge like press conferences, right?
Mhm.
Everybody like it's become a grand event, and I think now that the in-flight report I think is one of the I think probably closest to in the board game community, like those press conferences, right?
Right.
And even this year too, with the release of or the announcement of Arkham Horror Third Edition, um, and Keyforge being kind of their preliminary or the kind of their mainstay, like this is what we have to show off. Yeah, again, this was designed by Richard Garfield, who is of Magic the Gathering fame, and published again by Fantasy Flight. These guys, again, are building, for those that don't know, have created what's called a unique deck builder, which every single deck of cards that you buy from your local game store, from Fantasy Flight, whatever, is going to be completely unique from anyone else in the entire world. Again, theoretically, who knows? I guarantee you, Ian, there's going to be someone out there that is going to have something very close. Like there's going to be different names with the same cards. Hopefully not, right? The
Right.
math should be doing it. But again, no deck building. You pay $10, you get what you get. That's it. You don't have
Mhm.
to do anything else. I mean, if you want to fudge the system, sure, but that's not the whole point, or that's not the point at all.
Right.
So,
They've
I
actually
have
uh, they've actually put in ways where you can't fudge the system. Like the back of every one of your cards is printed your deck name, your unique
right.
deck name on it, and also you have a card list with a QR code on it, so that says these cards are supposed to be in this deck.
That's right.
So it's like a double system where you cannot deck build even if you wanted to.
That's correct. I mean, for casual play, I mean, there's probably something, somebody that will go ahead and just mix and match just to theoretically see how broken things could get. But
Mhm.
I think there's really a huge push with this unique building system to get all sorts of, I think card players, whether you be competitive or brand new that just focuses on this one deck, almost an equal size opportunity to compete, which I think is a real neat idea.
Yeah. Yeah, and so we've been playing it a lot, and like the gameplay loop of it is really nice, because like there's 7 factions total. Each deck is a makeup
Hmm.
of 6 cards from 3 different factions, um, and like you said, each deck is going to be different. Like there is just sort of like a set of cards that they're using, I believe. So it kind of feels like there's like a magic block worth of cards. It's
Yeah.
like probably
Hmm.
350, 400 different unique cards, but the deck makeups are different. And so on your turn, the interesting thing to me is that you choose one of the 3 factions, and you can only play cards and activate cards of the faction that you choose that turn.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't, like, you can play creatures out and be like, oh, I want these big beefy creatures, right? I got these Brobnar creatures because they have these big massive creatures that just sit on the board and attack your opponent and like take their stuff. Um, but if you have, some Mars cards in your hand you want to play, you can't do that and also activate your Brobnar creatures in the same turn. So it's
Right.
like this nice, interesting choice every turn of like, do I push what I have or do I play more out?
So okay, so yeah, that's one of the big things too. Like there's like three or four different, or no, for each deck, it's like it's multicolor up to three, right? Or are there mono colors? I don't remember.
There's just three. Each deck
It's
is
just
three.
three. So just to clarify again, if you said this, I apologize. But when you activate a specific clan or a faction, does that mean that you can like play onto your your game at any type of monsters, and theoretically, if you had some available, be able to attack with them or use their abilities as long as it's all within that activation of that faction, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
So you always just activate the one faction or play cards of the one faction. But a lot of the interesting things they get to do in this game is because they built this system where you can only activate things of one faction,
Mm-hmm.
is certain cards and abilities allow you to like break that rule.
Yeah. So like, could you say like this? So like maybe if we say do it in colors like red and yellow, like you play a red color out by using that faction red, and then for yellow maybe be like there's like a red, like if you decide to activate red, yellow triggers in a certain way. Is there kind of that cross contamination between cards?
Yeah, so like Brobnar, it's called Brobnar Red. They
Mm-hmm.
have like an artifact that you can play that you can just activate it, and when you activate it, it allows you to like ready an attack with any of your creatures. So that sort
Mm-hmm.
of it's any of them, not just one of the ones that you chose that faction for. So you get to break that rule with that. Or there's other ones that are
Nice.
like you can play two additional cards this turn, and they even have a keyword that specifically means you can use this no matter what faction you choose.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Yeah, because I think there had been some interpretation from people that I've heard that they said that, when you activate a certain faction that they felt very limited in terms of what they could do, but it seems like with how, small or if you're choosing between 1 and 3, when it's, at least as if you choose one, there's like a broad set of actual things that can be done, which definitely opens things up. So
Hmm.
I don't know. Like I said, I haven't seen it in the wild. I've just read and heard a lot about it, and I'm excited to give this a try. And it sounds like from you that this is definitely something that has legs. So I'm curious in terms of with this being maybe somewhat of the because they've done LCGs, and with Destiny that with that Fantasy Flight had come out with now Keyforge, like where do you see this going? Do you see Keyforge being an IP that can finally maybe push and get some market leverage against Magic, or theoretically any kind of I don't know CCG out there, or does this just kind of belong in its own little area that people are going to enjoy and like, but won't kind of have that still mass market appeal?
I think it's gonna hit a couple of different markets. Like I think it's gonna hit their LCG market, like because,
Mm-hmm.
and I think the people who like those are probably also going to gravitate towards this at least in a little bit because you know what you're getting, right? It is a little bit of
Right.
like a blind buy, but it's not like I need to buy all of this and then I also need a deck build, like
Mm-hmm.
or get all of these cards because these are the best cards in the game, right? Well, there's just a deck. You don't get those cards. You get what you get, and you have to use it. Which is sort of how like starter decks and most of those LCGs work, where it's like, oh well, this is my recommended setup for the very beginning of Arkham Horror LCG. Like I'm going to use this, and then after that game, you're like, oh crap, that didn't work at all.
Right.
um,
Exactly.
and I think they'll also hit the sort of Magic and CCG burnout market really hard. Like I think
Mm.
anyone
Yeah.
who's just used to play Magic, I think they're going to scoop up into this, because a lot of it is there's not really like a good play experience for people to get into Magic anymore. Like they're trying, but really like in any of the metas, any of the like tournament scene, anything like that, anywhere you want to play with other people, like people who are good at making Magic decks are going to beat you even if they play casually. Like you
Sure.
can't unlearn how to make a good Magic deck. Like even if you try and make a casual Magic deck, you're still gonna like, I'm gonna put 4 of this card in because that's good. I'm gonna put this big creature. I'm not gonna load it up with a bunch of 7 cost creatures. So they know just like the general how to build a Magic deck. Whereas someone new is gonna be like, oh, I really got this legendary. I want to put this legendary in here. This is gonna be the main thing in my deck. Is this legendary? So
Right.
I think you'll get a lot of those people who are just like, this is my
Right.
deck, and I can learn this deck, and I can love it, and I can treat it well, and it will take me far.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. I think that was one of the other complaints too. Was just that it kind of felt like if you like that's what it's weird now that I'm thinking about it. It's just like, let's say you spent like 10-20 bucks and you get 2 decks and they're bad, right? Quote unquote bad. How would you know? I mean, how would you know that? I guess theoretically,
Right.
I don't know, right? It's just like after you play 10 or 20 times, maybe you would know that it's good against these decks but bad against these decks, or maybe they're bad against a lot of them.
Right.
Or like, does that call into play you as a player or as the I think that's going to be a question and answer that will happen once we see the release of this. Is like, when someone gets a deck and this player plays it and loses 10 times, but then gives that same deck to someone, does the same amount of plays the same amount of games, like, we will definitely see, I think, the difference between a good player of Keyforge versus the card quality
Right.
and just random mix of cards. And I think that's if we get the latter half where we get players that play the same decks and do better or worse, I think that really says well to the design of Keyforge being like, you put the power of the cards in the right person's hand, and you can really mess some people up. So I think I think if it can execute that well, I think Keyforge would be a good success. That's for sure.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for sharing Keyforge, Call of the Archons by Fantasy Flight Games.